a lot of things started in my mind. I started in ham radio in 1967 and was basically a contester and chasing DX and doing a lot of fun stuff, building station, building antennas, uh, and getting a lot out of amateur radio. I was a uh, I was a CPA, so I had a lot of things. Well, I was a ham first, CPA much later, but ham radio was always kind of the recreational side of my life, and to take my mind off all the work stuff and to enjoy a whole separate set of friends. So one year, I can't find the article now, but it goes back many decades, and it was an article that basically said, uh, okay, you're enjoying ham radio. What are you giving back to ham radio? And it kind of got me thinking. And they gave a bunch of examples, and we're going to go through a bunch of examples. And if there may be somebody who's looking for uh, a way to participate and contribute that they haven't thought of, and hey, maybe it'll inspire them a little bit. So, among the possibilities, teaching classes, individual mentoring, taking on a field appointment in the ARRL structure, doing traffic handling, taking on leadership roles in clubs. For the many clubs I've visited, I know some of them have, it's the same old officers every year, and God bless them, but you need some new blood. You need to get some new people involved, and if nobody steps up, those are the clubs that tend to wither. Um, Antenna work parties where you're helping out other hams, getting things up in the air. Um, Outreach for amateur radio to the public, public relations stuff. Um, there are slots for certain volunteer specialists. If you're a civil engineer, mechanical engineer, or an attorney, we have volunteer counsel and volunteer engineers that can provide some initial consultation to hams. Those are two programs through ARRL. And then, of course, elected ARRL leadership positions. So, as I say, I was an active DXer contester. Many years ago, I joined the Southern California DX Club. And of course, being a CPA, that's kind of a magnet for treasurer duties. So when the old treasurer retired, they needed somebody. I stepped in and said, okay, I'll give it a shot. So we kind of organized the books, and it was all manual back then. Um, but organized the books and kept the records, the membership records, and so on. And showed up at the meetings, took the money, uh, did all the accounting. And so I did a year of that. And then nobody else stepped up, and I did it again and again and again and again. So had quite a run. And finally, we found somebody who wanted to take that over. I became vice president. And as in many clubs, the vice president is responsible for finding programs. So that turned out to be an interesting challenge. Um, and of course, at the time, everything was in person. So you had to find somebody willing to come to your club meeting some weekday evening in some downtown place or wherever it happened to be, and uh, and put on a show, and have the slide projector ready and all that. So uh, we did that for a year, and then eventually I was elected president of the SCDXC. Uh, Ran that for a year, tried to get us over some speed bumps, and then took on a director role after I stepped down as president. So that got me kind of into the idea of helping lead or move the club forward. Now we have an organization called the Los Angeles Area Council of Radio Clubs. I'm sure there are analogous organizations around the country. I know Arizona has ARCA, and many other places have organizations where clubs and club representatives get together. So of course, I offered to be the delegate from the Southern Cal DX Club, having been officer for many years. And guess what? The treasurer needed to retire, and guess who got picked? There we were again. Okay, so back in my treasurer role, this time for the LA Area Council, and then went for a year or so as president of that. So getting involved locally is not that hard. You find people who have are willing to put in a little bit of time, and you're willing to give them a shot at doing the job, support them, and that's kind of what helps organizations continue and grow. Now, back around 1998, I think came down with a case of pneumonia, and that left me several weeks off of work and off of pretty much everything. So while I was recouping from that, I had been to a Southern Cal Contest Club meeting where our then director, Art Goddard, W6 X-Ray Delta, now Silent Key, as many directors and vice directors do, had brought a stack of books to give away. And he happened to have the paper manuals for the ARRL's level 1, 2, and 3 emergency communication courses. So I was sitting there lying there and with pneumonia. I thought, well, heck, let me grab this level 1 book and see what we can do with it. So I started looking through it. A lot of it, of course, at that point, I'd been a ham probably, 30 some years. So there was a lot of stuff that seemed pretty familiar, but there were some things that I wasn't aware of. And I thought, okay, this is interesting. And at the time, they had a program where they hooked you up with a mentor, and you went through each chapter and did a couple of exercises, and then you sent stuff off to your mentor for evaluation and comment. So I did that, and come up with some fun projects in the process, and managed to complete the level 1 course. Part of that course required that you find out what's going on in your local EMCOM community, mainly ARES or whatever they happened to be. Well, the ARES program in Los Angeles at the time was kind of, it was basically not operating, but there was a group called Auxiliary Communication Service that supported the LA City departments and managed by the fire department. So I talked to one of the guys who was in charge of that and said, yeah, come on and join, and you can see what it's about. So I thought, okay, let's give it a try. So we did, and started getting a little view of, the FEMA courses and things like that. But in the meantime, I decided to go ahead and finish level 2 and level 3 of the ARRL MCOM courses. And again, each time I learned something new and did a bunch of additional exercises and so on. And I started to realize that, hey, ARES is potentially a very active program. And we have people around willing to get involved, but we needed to get it started. We needed to jumpstart it. So talked with one of my ham friends who had been down to he was in the DX club, but he had gone down to Louisiana after the big hurricane down there, and had provided communication around the state. And so that got me very interested and said, well, why don't we get ARES going again? And so we rounded up some like-minded souls from various places and got it going. I developed incorporated a support group so that we'd have a way to gather some funds and also allow us to get, places where we could meet. And that kind of grew. And ARES went from basically 2 people to about 400. And so that took us around for the next several decades, and it's still kicking and alive today and bringing in new hams and getting them involved in public service. So that turned out to be a pretty good thing. So as I say, with ACS, as is the case with most organizations, government organizations that receive preparedness funds from FEMA, they require all their employees, and that's defined very broadly to include volunteers, to take some basic core courses. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with IS 100, 200, 700, 800. That talks about the National Response Framework and National Incident Management System and the Incident Command System. So I took those, and that was enough to last us for a while. Meanwhile, I had retired from my job, and it was kind of time to see what was going on in my own community. Um, and at this time, I had already started picking up some net control duties and doing a little bit of training of new members and meeting with our served agencies. But again, there were community things going on that I thought maybe I should see what's going on. For one thing, we still have issues with communities where amateur radio operators have, they face difficulty getting antennas up in the air, and to some extent that comes from uh, neighbors not knowing what you're doing or why you're doing it, and that was that's always an issue. And so we need to get amateur radio a good name. We want people to realize that having a ham in your community is a good thing. Um, when I moved from one home to another, and I had um, decided I wanted to put up a big system, at least big for me. So I uh, I got the permits and ended up putting in 100 feet of stacked section and big Yagis on it, all turned with a one big prop pitch rotator. And I went around to my neighbors, and as I was planning to move in, and told them what we were doing, what we were about, they all seemed pretty cool with it. So we ended up uh, finally getting, after a few years, getting a tower up, and then I had to get the mast for it. The mast was uh, it was a couple of 100 pounds. It's like 24 feet long and almost 3 inches in diameter, quarter-inch wall, 4130 alloy steel, and it happened to arrive just about the time that my wife and I were away at work for the day, and the driver got there, and there was nobody to unload the thing. And so the neighbor lady across the street, who was pregnant at the time, came out to see what was going on. And they said, "Well, I've got this thing to deliver, but there's nobody here to take it off the truck." So she gathered the neighbor ladies around, and God bless them, they shouldered that 200-pound mast and lugged it out and got it onto my front lawn. So you talk about having cooperative neighbors. I can't think of anything better than that. So as I say, when I retired at the end of 1999, Los Angeles was in the process of developing what they called neighborhood councils, and these were uh, community, local community groups that were formed under a set of rules and with elections and so on to advise our city council members on matters affecting our specific communities. Um, so I ended up leading the formation effort. Again, I was not the one who came up with the idea, but the guy who was leading the idea was decided he was going to run for school board, LA school board, and so that left a kind of a vacuum. And everybody said, "Well, Marty, if you take it, we'll help." Well, I did take it, and one of them actually helped. Uh, so we got ourselves certified, and I was elected president for a couple of years, and so we were able to get a lot of community improvement projects done during that time, and I got to know a lot more uh, folks in the city, leaders in various communities, and of course, I didn't want to waste the opportunity to promote amateur radio a bit and kind of explain why that's an important element of the overall community, you know, resilience, if you will. And at the time, we were all, as we still are, concerned about the growth of amateur radio, and I decided to become an ARRL volunteer instructor. And we had demand through ARES for classes at various groups. And so I became a volunteer instructor, and then at the same time became a license examiner with the Greater Los Angeles Amateur Radio Group, which, by the way, is the one that really uh, really revved up the idea of online licensing exams during COVID. They were the leader in that in the country, and of course an ARRL license examiner as well. So I started teaching licensing classes at local colleges, American Legion posts, hospitals, and got quite a few folks licensed as a result. And that was really fun because these folks were coming from all walks of life, and to find out what their interests were and why they were getting involved in amateur radio, uh, not gave me a chance to expose them to some other areas of amateur radio that maybe they weren't that familiar with. So that worked out to be a regular thing for a while. Well, now in 2007, I'd been doing this for, after I've been retired now for 6 or 7 years, and a certain ARRL director, N6AA Dick Norton, said, Marty, we need you to run for vice director. And I hadn't thought at all about any kind of elected position with the league. And Art Goddard said, yeah, Marty, you need to run for vice director. And Friedheim, and they said, yes, you need to run for vice director. And so I ended up filing for the position. We had a four-way race, and fortunately, I came out on top. And that began 9 years of working on the board and working within the division. During that time, I got to go around lots and lots of clubs, giving talks, maybe going to antenna hearings, trying to provide support where we could. We had some real successes where some bad legislation or bad regulation locally turned into favorable regulation. On the board, you have several standing committees. Two of them are administration and finance, and the executive committee, which I was not part of. Those are generally all directors. And so I was, because again, my background was as a CPA. They decided to add me to the administration and finance committee, and I kind of got elbows deep into that for several years. And now, while I was starting on HF and really came up through the HF ranks, I'd gotten into VHF and UHF and microwave contesting quite a bit. So when the time came to revisit our VHF and UHF band plans, we formed a committee. Rick Roderick, now ARRL president, was chair of that committee, and we had Dave Sumner on there and several others. So we basically rewrote big chunks of the VHF UHF band plan and went through all the exposure drafts, getting people to comment on it, evaluating different what people were used to in different parts of the country varied, especially on some of the upper bands. And here in the LA area, which is probably one of the most RF dense in the country, we were facing competing spectrum demands that other places in the country had never seen, but probably would see in the future. So we had to consider not only what their standard operating procedure was on the various bands, but also what they would likely face in the future. So we rewrote parts of that band plan. Now in 2008, um, I'd been just less than a year as vice director, but I was still active in ARES and ACS. And we had I was mentioning just before things started, we had a number of, great shakeouts and other kinds of exercises with local hospitals. ARES primary clientele, if you will, were the LA County hospitals, and they'd had an exercise going on one Thursday, and I was assigned up to a place called Olive View Medical Center up in the northeast corner of the San Fernando Valley. And I went there and talked to the emergency coordinator, and he said, well, we're not really doing anything for this exercise, but make yourself at home and do what you need to do. So I found went around on the grounds and found a spot where I had some sort of radio coverage. It's in the hills, and found out which repeaters would work and which ones didn't. So we did our exercise, passed messages, and all that. Got home the next day, 2 in the morning. We had a huge fire called the Sayer Fire that broke out. It wiped out a whole mobile home community, and it was starting to burn outbuildings in the hospital. And because of the damage to the infrastructure, the hospital had lost pretty much all communication with the Medical Alert Center, which was the LA County facility that basically coordinates where ambulances go, and what hospitals are open and closed and what beds are available and all that. And they were concerned they might have to evacuate the whole hospital. So I got this call at 2 in the morning, and uh, I grabbed my. I hadn't even unpacked the truck yet from the exercise the day before, which was really fortunate. So I had, power, I had antennas, I had radios and paperwork and everything else. And we managed to grab my goggles and my dust mask, and um, started heading over to the hospital. And that was that was an adventure, because with the fire, a lot of the roads were closed or blocked off. So I had another ham who happened to be up at that time, and he was concerned about whether it would spread to his area. He got on and was looking at the maps while I made my way up, and he's suggesting different routes to take. And I finally got to a spot where there was live personnel there, and I explained that we were getting to the hospital to provide communications at the request of the Medical Alert Center. And they said, okay, go through, but check in with the fire captain when you get there. So I did, and one of my buddies from up a few miles north also made that trip, and we joined up in the parking lot, grabbed what gear we could, and boy, it's a good thing I had those goggles, because ash was flying all over the place. And we got to the hospital doors, and now I'd been there the prior day, so we finally talked our way in. They were going to run us through metal detectors, and I said, look, I've got all sorts of radios and metal, I can do this job or not. And so they let us in, and went into the emergency coordinator and said, hi, remember me from yesterday? Here we are. So we reestablished communications with the MAC with what we brought with us, and that went on for the rest of the night. And then in the day, once they got some comms back, they released us, and then I went to go work at a local shelter. So, all this stuff we practice turned out to be definitely worth the effort, and um, being familiar with the area and being familiar with the procedures made a huge difference. So again, I had another 9 years as vice director. It meant went to a lot of club meetings every year, and this gave me a good chance to see what different clubs were doing, particularly what was successful, what was missing in some clubs, and try to make some suggestions and support these clubs as best we could. I ended up developing several presentations. At first, of course, you typically, when you talk about ARRL and what it's doing, and that was a fairly easy sell, but I realized there was a demand for a lot more formal information. Now, I'm not an engineer. I've never had electronics training. As I say, I was a CPA, but hams are really good at sharing information. And I had gathered a lot and learned a lot from people I hung around with over the years. So I started putting a few talks together, and then enhancing them and adding to them over the years. And so I could pick from several different subjects when a club needed a talk. So that gave me a chance to get out and talk to lots and lots of folks, made great friends. Uh, and that also got me into invitations to speak at conventions and things like that. Um, when we had some communities with antenna ordinance issues, I got involved in that. We had as I say, some real successes there. The U.S. Forest Service decided they were going to put some um, really outrageous financial demands on users of Forest Service locations, and things that probably would be okay for a cell company that makes thousands of dollars a minute, but not for repeater sites where the hams are struggling for financial resources. So I ended up renegotiating their proposal down to a point where um, it was workable for most of the licensees. And that was a long, involved process, but we had some success there. Um, and as I was vice director, I also became a net control for a something called the ARRL Southwestern Division HF Net. This is a Sunday morning net. Takes place every Sunday at 8 o'clock in the morning on 75 meters, and started getting check-ins from around the division, and then we started getting folks from outside the division, and now it covers not only our sections but also Nevada and San Joaquin Valley up in the Pacific Division. And again, we all share information about what's going on, answer people's questions, talk about programs and opportunities. And I've been doing that now for probably almost 20 years. And that's been a real enjoyable part of the hobby. And again, this is something I kind of stepped up to do when somebody else had to back down, but it turned out to be a great thing for me because, as I say, I get to some really well-meaning and energetic folks. We get to share what's going on and kind of support one another. So that again was a great opportunity, as it turns out. So in 2017, I decided it was time to step down as vice director. And part of my motivation was some of you may remember at the time there were some restrictions being put on directors and vice directors in terms of what they could say in public and so on. And they were working on something called the Amateur Radio Parity Act, which was intended to provide uh, federal protection for amateurs in uh, deed restricted communities. Unfortunately, it was written very poorly and had some huge flaws and red flags in it. And I couldn't say anything when I was on the board. So I decided I was going to retire. And then once I was off, then I was able to start sending some letters out. And we started what became a national campaign to basically kill that bill. And want part of getting it killed required that we change certain directors who were kind of wedded to this thing. And we got a campaign that basically unseated 4 of the 5 directors who were up for election at this time. And but for the interference of one particular legal counsel, we would have had all 5 seats. So that allowed us to kill that bill and start something that actually would work well. If you go back to last year, you'll find on the RATPAC a talk with a couple of the folks on the board who are keeping that thing, building that thing going and building up support for it in Congress. So we swapped a turkey for a real meaningful bill that we hope will make some progress. And so at that time, also, I became a training officer for the Auxiliary Communication Service, realizing that um, just like many clubs and new hams, folks who've been involved with this program needed some training. They needed to become more familiar with hands-on things, and so started, holding regular training sessions and building training components into the exercises that we do. So in 2018, I was surprised and just thrilled to get an invitation from my friend Rusty Epps, W6OAT, longtime well-known contester, as some of you may know from the Bay Area, to join the board of the Yasme Foundation. Yasme Foundation started out as a support group for de-expeditions like those of Lloyd and Iris Colvin, but it morphed into a basically an organization that looks to improve and enhance amateur radio around the world. So we're not a de-expedition funder anymore. There are plenty of other clubs and so on that do that. but we look for projects. We had some funds that were left to the foundation, and so we manage those funds, and we look for projects that we can use to, again, enhance amateur radio. And that board included Fred Long, K3ZO, who many of you know, now a silent key, but a giant in the amateur radio community. Ward Silver, N0AX, the editor of the longtime editor of the ARRL handbook, and Marty Lane, OH2BH, de-expeditioner extraordinaire, and Rusty, Ken Clarebot, K4ZW, who has a gigantic presence in the countries in Africa, Hans Blondeel Timmerman, PB2T, who was at one point IARU Region 1 president, James Brooks, 9B1YC in Singapore, who many of you know if you've been on the air active in contests, and of course Bob Valio, W6RGG, one of the original board members, and at the time second vice president for ARRL. So we meet quarterly, and we look for projects. Some people ask us, for funding, but we look for things that need some support, some financial support. And we're a private foundation. You're probably familiar with ARDC by now, the Amateur Radio Digital Corp. We are like them, a private foundation, but we're about 1% of their size. And we have a requirement to spend a certain percentage of our funds each year on exempt projects. So some of the things we've been getting involved with are providing support for what's called YODA, or Youth on the Air, which was a program in ITU Region 1, Europe and Africa, and now has expanded with our help and encouragement to Region 2, which is North and South America. And we're looking at supporting the start of something out in Region 3, which is Asia Pacific. We funded a large number of reverse beacon network nodes, particularly in areas that were underserved. Those of you familiar with the Reverse Beacon Project know that you could basically see propagation around the world based on these wideband internet connected receivers that are scattered all over the place. They're very heavy into Europe and North America, but there were some spots in Africa, Russia, South America, and the Pacific where there was no real coverage. And the ham-sci, or ham science community, makes very good use of these. So we funded the purchase and deployment of a number of those nodes, I think 10 or 12 of them, and getting them out in areas that had previously had no coverage. So that proved very, very useful to a lot of people. We continue each quarter to meet, and in between meetings, come up with additional funding ideas. We have projects, for example, in the Caribbean. Many of you may know Fred Kleber. He used to be in Illinois. Now he is I think he's the section emergency coordinator for the Virgin Islands section. And they, of course, have had their share of hurricanes and other natural disasters. And in the Virgin Islands, the hams there don't work for the government agencies because there is no government agency doing what they do. So they pretty much have full responsibility to set up and maintain communications during these disasters. So we worked with ARDC and provided some funding from them and from us to build out a robust repeater network that would cover the various islands and also link up into Puerto Rico. So those are some of the fun projects we've done. We also give out a Yasme Excellence Award now and then to people we think are unsung heroes but deserving, and who have contributed a lot to amateur radio on their own without any real recognition. Our own Dan, K7REX, is one of those, and we have a list of them out on the Yasme website over the years. So 2020 came along. Now we got COVID. Well, there's some more study time for you. So I decided to dig in. I thought, well, it's only a couple of weeks, right? Yeah, I wish. Well, so in a couple of weeks, I went online and basically completed the entire FEMA professional development series of courses. There's about 12 of them. And then I started at the same time doing club presentations online. Previously, everything had been in person. Um, and that's when I ran into Dan and his folks doing RATPAC. So in 2021, I was invited to join the planning team and have been there since. And so the planning group basically, we provide some of our own programs, but importantly, we look for presenters with interesting topics that we think would play well in the amateur community. You all are, most of you are regulars here, and you've seen the results of that, the committee's work, and the great people who have stepped up to provide programs to us. So when I go back to that original list of ideas on how you can contribute to amateur radio, find we've ticked off quite a few of the boxes. I'm not a traffic handler, although I know how, but my wife is. She got licensed about 12 years ago. And for the last 10 years or more, she's been on twice a week taking NTS traffic, National Traffic System messages and delivering them and relaying them and so on. And I'm not qualified to be a volunteer specialist because they don't need volunteer CPAs, but I've had the opportunity to work with some of the volunteer council and so on, and they've been very, very helpful in our addressing issues that some of the amateur radio clubs and groups have. So I hope some of this will give you some ideas on things you could do to and share with your club members and the hams you know, especially those who have a particular talent for presenting or for providing certain sorts of mentoring, and give them a list and let them go. You'd be surprised what sorts of resources can come out of that. You can develop good people to keep this whole thing going. So anyway, that's really it. Let's unhighlight so we can see everybody and see what sorts of comments we get. After everybody unmutes. It's quiet.
Well, anybody got their hand raised or want to speak up or throw eggs or whatever? Okay, Gene's got his hand up. Take it away, Gene.
Yes, first of all, no, this is November 3 X-ray, Uniform Sarah here in glorious, clean Texas. I want to say it was a great presentation. You certainly had a full plate of things on it that kept you busy, actively or passively over the years when it comes to amateur radio operations and giving back to the community. I think a lot of times we forget. Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. When it comes to MCOM for our communities, and we talk about the served agencies, we forget that basically the served agencies are local communities. They're the ones that it's all about. I mean, not driving 20, 30 miles away to an EOC. I mean, that's fine. Don't get me wrong. I do it once a month. But in an emergency, you're in the area. You are what the Army calls human intelligence. You're the eyes on the ground. You see what's going on. You see and hear the need. And so it's important to understand that you do not have to join a volunteer organization to help community in the big picture of things, but you are part of that local community and you are there, so stay there so you can get updates to that larger center.
Really good
That's my
point.
one point. Huh? Go ahead.
Very good point, Gene. And in fact, back it's probably 10, 12 years ago when the ARRL's EC001 course was being rewritten. I the guy who was coordinating all this asked me to take a look at the draft, and I came up with hundreds and hundreds of edits and gave him reasons why. But the main thing I noticed was I said everything in this course is geared toward working with agencies, which is fine. But amateur radio started out working with their local communities, and there's not a chapter at all on working with your neighbors in your community. So I said, we need one. And he said, well, it's got to go to the printer Monday. This was on a Friday. I said, I'll write it over the weekend and give it to you. And I did, and it got incorporated. But
Excellent.
so that's the sort of, yeah, you're absolutely right. You need, and that's where that CERT training came in very handy, by the way, because as a community emergency response team, it's like, what can you do to help your neighbors and your family and so on, or your coworkers, depending on where you are when things hit. When the first responders are overwhelmed and can't get to everybody, well, you become the first responders. And the program, for those not familiar with it, it teaches preparedness, basic fire suppression, basic search and rescue, triage, basic medical, and so on. And all those things are skills that you can add to your arsenal and find neighbors or coworkers who have complementary skills and work together to help while the official responders are just basically overwhelmed.
Exactly. And as an amateur radio operator, being part of a CERT team, eventually people are going to know that, oh, this guy also has the ability to a little bit further.
Yeah.
So,
In fact, we've one of the things our ACS group has done is we have regular training courses we've given to community CERT groups on how to use FRS radios effectively. And from that, some of them have ended up going beyond that when they see that our capabilities are greater than just with an FRS radio, and they end up getting licensed. So, you may be growing the amateur community, even though that's not the primary purpose of the thing.
right, there's a lot of ways to plant the seed to get people thinking about amateur radio, but you did a great job tonight. And I've taken some notes upon what you've put out, and more to follow. You
Well,
have a
thank
great
you.
one.
And
Thank
of
you.
course, we'll put a PDF up on the site so you can link to it. Dennis has his hands up.
Yeah, Marty, thank you. Hey, great job tonight. And, I've known you for a long time and I appreciate everything that you do. And I wanted to comment about the Southwest Division Section Managers Net. One of the things that I truly appreciate about what you guys do is invite other divisions and sections to participate with your net. And the reason being that disasters don't know those boundaries. They don't know the geopolitical boundaries. They ignore all that stuff. And we know here where we are that we're going to be working with you guys when the next big one hits here in Southern California. And it'll be one way or the other. We're going to be working with you, or you're going to be working with us up here if we get another big one here. But it's just an appreciation for the fact that you allow, and we're, I'm a regular participant on Sunday as ASEC here in San Joaquin Valley section. And it's just really nice that you've invited us to be part of your team down there with that. And of course, we participate with your Aries net on HF as well. And that's an important aspect. Regional communications. A lot of groups are just like our group here in Eastern Kern County. Everything we do here is on 2 meters, but we need to have that activity on the HF bands as well. And so it's a way to get people participating. And we're trying to start something up like that here in San Joaquin Valley section. So we'll see what happens and where that goes. But
well, you guys have been really regular and valuable contributors to the net too. So we appreciate your being there. When somebody has an experience or they've either got something worked out that's helping their community, or they have a need or whatever, that gets shared with folks from San Diego and Arizona and Orange County and up in the the
Santa,
Eastern Sierras.
Santa Barbara and Ventura counties
Santa
too.
Barbara, Ventura,
The whole coast.
and everybody's got something going on. We find out about events where they need volunteers, and sometimes we can provide supplemental volunteers. But it's just like teaching. It's been a learning experience for me. Anytime I teach a class, I usually end up learning something in the process, which is part of what makes it fun. And from you guys up in the San Joaquin Valley section and down in San Diego and all over, we get great participation and some really good ideas, and find out how people are doing different things and share it. So it's been a win-win. It really has.
It's led to some really great regional exercises too, which I'm really happy to have been
Very
participating
much.
in those.
It actually we started when it was early in the process. Glenn, KV7 REO, who's the assistant section manager for Nevada, said, hey, we're sitting here across the border from the guys in Bishop, which is up in the Eastern Sierras, and yet we're not only in different sections, we're in different divisions. Can we work together? I said, hell yeah, that's absolutely no reason you can't do that. And we encouraged it. And they've become, some of the California folks become the ARRL's, Nevada ARRL's net controls when the propagation requires. And they've had a lot of cross-border cooperation. They go to each other's meetings, and that has been very, very productive.
Well, they've got the same problem that we've got here. Is we have this massive granite wall that separates us from the rest of our section and division, and we don't have that between ourselves and you. We've got a mountain range, but it's not the big one that like the Sierra Nevada, and they're even worse off than we are farther north. So that was a great opportunity for them to set up that MOU, and that's a good model what they did.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Marty, thanks again for everything.
Thank you, Dennis.
Presentation. Yeah.
Okay. Other comments, questions? Okay. Well, I hope some of you will share this with your, with your club members and so on. And again, whether it's stepping up to club leadership or accepting an appointment in your section, or building up your training in certain response for your community, working with your local elected officials, getting to know homeowner groups and so on. All of those things add to your ability to help them and to help your community. And also it improves the image of amateur radio. A lot of the things we do are fun for us, but it doesn't really matter much to the members of the community. But the stuff that you do that contributes to the community's well-being, that gets noticed and that gets recognized. And my longstanding take on HOAs and things like that is it's more important to provide incentive than it is to argue that you have rights. Okay, the push mode doesn't work very well, but when you point out all the stuff that they could be having to help them, if they just eased up on their rules a little bit, then you're making some progress. We have several big HOAs, thousands of homes, where they've not only allowed amateur radio, but they've actually dedicated space for community radio room with tower and stuff, so that those who are licensed can help them. They recognize that in a time of need, they're going to be on their own for quite a while, and having that communication capability is a plus. So that's where it's really taken hold, and we'd like to see more of that. Okay, if nothing else, Dan, we'll call it an evening.